All right, Mike McDaniel on the line from, again, it's Hokie Hangover, Sons of Saturday, ESPN Blacksburg, and his basketball conference podcast as well. Any early thoughts on Clemson, Notre Dame, part two?
Yeah. First of all, it's kind of weird that the game's at 4:00. It's my initial just kind of like non X's and O's takeaway from it. It's like, man, that game is going to be at 4:00. That's going to be very weird next Saturday. But I think from a Clemson standpoint, right? I mean, the national headlines are going to just grab on to, okay, Trevor Lawrence is back this time. And that's fair, right? But I think the real story of this football game is that Clemson will have Tyler Davis and James Skalski back. That's the headline. That's the story. When you look at the matchup between Notre Dame and Clemson back about 2 months ago now, the reason why Notre Dame had such success in the football game is because they dominated the trenches, both on the offensive line and the defensive line. Clemson didn't lose the game against Notre Dame the first time because they didn't have Trevor Lawrence. It certainly didn't help, and it'll be great to have him this time around. But DJ Uiagalelei had a great game in South Bend. The real reason why Clemson lost that game is because they lost that battle in the trenches. And I think that in order for Notre Dame to have similar success on both sides of the football, both offensively and defensively in this game, they're going to have to win that battle again. And it's really cliche and it's fun to say, right? It's like, oh, they got to win the battle in the trenches. It's a thing that's thrown out there in every game preview, right? But it's really true in this game now, especially with Clemson having James Skalski and Tyler Davis back. That is a much bigger deal for Clemson than having Trevor Lawrence back. National headlines are going to grab onto the Trevor Lawrence storyline, and that's fine because he deserves it, and he's one of the best college quarterbacks we've ever seen, Mark. But the real story of this game is Clemson getting a key player back, both on the defensive line and in the linebacking court that they didn't have a couple months ago. That is huge for this matchup.
Yeah, if you look at Clemson's passing attack against Notre Dame in the first matchup, both statistically and watching the game and seeing how it played out, DJ Uiagalelei threw for 439 yards, completed 70% of his passes. You know, there's not that much more ceiling or room for improvement there. Right. But there were a couple spots in which Trevor Lawrence might have made a better decision.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, the quick passing game too, right? DJU, as I call him, right? There are spots in that game against Notre Dame where, you know, he hasn't seen everything that Trevor Lawrence has seen over his 3 years at Clemson, right? So Trevor Lawrence naturally is going to be a lot quicker from a decision-making standpoint. He's going to get the ball out quicker, which is going to help to negate that Notre Dame pass rush, which was so good in that first matchup. Notre Dame's defense has been fantastic all year. Trevor Lawrence in that quick passing game, that's what was missing for Clemson offensively, and that will definitely help Clemson having Trevor Lawrence in the lineup. But when you look at it just from a statistical standpoint, you know, seeing that Uiagalelei completed over 70% of his passes and threw for over 430 yards in the football game, you look at it from that standpoint, it's like, okay, no big deal. You dig a little deeper and you realize that having that quick passing game is obviously pivotal. And then on the other side, just having some key players back at two levels of the defense that you didn't have in the first matchup, that's crucial as well. But the one thing I want to point out from Notre Dame's side is that Ian Book, you know, that was kind of like his coming out party, so to speak. I know he's been around for a while and it's his senior year and he's been a 3-year starter at Notre Dame. But he really started to come along strongly. He was okay early in the year, but that game that he had against Clemson, I think, was huge for his confidence. And Ian Book is a fantastic player. I mean, he's really good. He's extremely underrated. And I think now he's gotten to the point in his Notre Dame career, Mark, where he's less of a guy who is a game manager and just helping Notre Dame not to lose. Whereas now I think he's a key part of helping Notre Dame win. And him unlocking the passing offense in the second half of the season, and it really started in that Clemson game, has been so pivotal to Notre Dame's success to get them to where they are, being one of those elite teams in college football and giving them a real opportunity to go out and have a chance to not only compete in the college football playoff, but potentially win a national championship. He's been that kind of player in the second half of the season, and they're going to have him play well again against Clemson in order for Notre Dame to be in that position.
Yeah, the national perception and the average college football fans' outlook on who Ian Book is pre-Notre Dame Clemson game versus now is totally different. It was the game manager. He's decent, but he's not great. He'll not lose you the game or win you the game. He needs complementary pieces, which everybody does, obviously. And now it's just changed to this guy who can play like Brett Favre and create on the run and be dynamic and do all these things. It's just a completely different perspective on what he can do.
Agree. And by the way, that was all fair criticism of him too. I mean, he has really improved. This year has been pivotal for him. I mean, he's really come along strong. And I think what Notre Dame can do against Clemson that they haven't been able to do in years past, number one, is the depth they have offensively and defensively. You lose a guy, they can plug another one in. And it's not like in the Cotton Bowl a couple of years ago in the semifinal where Notre Dame's playing Clemson with Trevor Lawrence as a true freshman. And he sees Julian Love leave the game for Notre Dame at cornerback, and they can just throw a guy out there, and Clemson's like, all right, we're just going to throw on him, because that totally changed the complexion of the football game. Notre Dame couldn't move the ball offensively in that game, but I think what they were able to do defensively was keep that game competitive a couple of years ago. Now Notre Dame can throw a bunch of guys in there on the defensive side of the football, and that really, I think, helps them from a depth standpoint, and offensively, they're just much better in the trenches on the offensive line and the defensive line than they've been. And they've had some really, really good units. But from a depth standpoint, they're stout, and they have a real opportunity to do something that's repeatable against Clemson from the first matchup. You win that battle up front, offensively and defensively. I think you have a great chance to win the football game. I see the comment saying it started with the Pitt game. I agree with that. Notre Dame's passing offense was very good in the Pittsburgh game, but Pittsburgh's passing defense has been so bad all year. To see Notre Dame do what they did through the air against a team like Clemson, it means more.
And also for me, getting back to the Miami situation, because Miami not playing Notre Dame, Miami having one loss, Clemson having one loss, and that issue that could have happened just in regards to people wondering, okay, what would have happened had Miami played Notre Dame? And regardless of today's results, we'll never know. But I think it's clear to see that Notre Dame's clearly a better team. But the match that I wanted to make was after watching Notre Dame's defense, and you touched on it, how good they were against that offense, that North Carolina offense, that is a legit top five-ish offense in the country.
Right.
And they gave up 2 touchdowns right out of the gate. First 2 drives, touchdowns. Then they adjusted, figured things out. A field goal, 1 field goal the rest of the game against that offense.
Yeah.
And I've been talking all week saying I can't wait to see Miami's defense to make that comparison. And it's only a 1-game comparison. I'm not blowing it out of proportion, but it's still something to go on. And of course, we saw what the difference was.
That game and the adjustments that the Irish made defensively should single-handedly get Clark Lee the Vanderbilt coaching job if he wants it. I mean, outstanding from an X's and O's standpoint against, like you mentioned, against that offense and what North Carolina's been able to do to a lot of opponents this year. I mean, the fact that North Carolina literally could not move the football down the field at all in the second half. It was 3 and out after 3 and out after 3 and out in the second half. They could not move the football, rendered absolutely useless. They got playmakers everywhere. Running backs, receivers, tight ends are good. Offensive line's been really good. Like, North Carolina's got a really, really good offense, Mark, and they couldn't do anything in that football game outside of really the first 2 drives. Like you mentioned, there was a field goal there after that, but just absolutely shut down on defense. It was really impressive.
Good stuff from Mike McDaniel. Again, follow him on Twitter, and he's here on a regular basis as well. Mike, appreciate you stopping by, giving us a breakdown.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mark. Thanks.